Happy Place Home Studios.
This is part 2 of our Replacing the Heart of Your Studio series on Happy Place Home Studio, called New System Installation and Data Transfer. This is where the rubber meets the road with your planning for your new system and actually getting it set up, installed, and up and running. And unlike previous generations, and I've been through many generations of Apple hardware, there's a lot more to it these days, because it's not just about making a backup and installing it on the new system. You've got so many other considerations you really have to work around and deal with. And that includes security, passwords, licensing of your software. You're going to find out a lot as you go through this process. I know that I did. Now, this is an unusual video for me to produce because it's a little bit like the Helix upgrade video, if any of you watched that, in that when you're filming and documenting an upgrade, you really can't do it twice. You can only do it once. So you have to do it live and in real time and as it happens. And so all of the strange and unusual things that come up are part of that documentation and really interfere with what you might have planned to do. And that certainly was the case with this video. Now, the portions of the video where I'm kind of sitting here in my studio, black screen behind me, et cetera, are made after the fact. So I already know what happened when I did my upgrade. Also, they're being produced with the new system. So I'm glad to report that, yes, I am back up and running. But it's an interesting story, and hopefully it's presented in an interesting way. Just one thing I want to note as we walk through the story is that there are several points in the video where I refer to, at the end of this video, we're going to go through some details on the Apple upgrade and generic details about upgrading your system. That's been pushed off to part 3 because there's a lot of material that I want to present there. So this one is really just about walking through how my system was updated and upgraded and some of the trials and tribulations experienced there. And hopefully that will be of some interest as you go through and do your own upgrade. Some early learning that I have for you is that whatever you thought was going to happen is probably going to go a bit differently. I really had high hopes and anticipation that in upgrading to the Apple Mac Studio, I'd have the kind of fairly smooth transition I've had in the past. But it's a sophisticated, powerful system, and it was a sophisticated upgrade with a lot of twists and turns, as you'll see. So let's dive in and take a look at how things unfolded as I finally received my new Apple computer after several months of waiting. One other aspect of this video that I want to kind of tell you about is that many of the segments were not produced inside my studio with my regular setup, obviously. And unfortunately, some of the audio from my camera was not sounding good. Primarily, I think, because one of the microphone channels on my good Blackmagic camera does not appear to be working. So unfortunately, I could not really tell that at the time, and so I've done what I can with that, but it's not up to par. So I can't go back and do it again by definition. So we'll just have to deal with that here in the video. Well, 3 months have gone by since I ordered my new Apple computer, and it's been a long wait, but everything is here. Now, of course, as Apple often does, they immediately shipped all the little adapters and connectors and all that kind of thing, the mouse, the keyboard, etc. but it took a little longer to get the screen and the Mac Studio itself. So Mac Studio's here, which is the last thing to come in. And to be honest, I was really worried about delays on that because, you know, we're in that period of time right after COVID that there's lots of shortages of chips and that kind of thing. But here we are, and this is the time frame that Apple originally gave me, so kudos to Apple on that. So I have prepared in various different ways, as previously explained, for this day, and now it's time to get set up. So I'm not going to go through traditional unboxing. I'm going to do a time lapse for you. But you know, there's lots of unboxing videos out there of the Mac Studio, and there's some really, really good ones. I don't have any reason to repeat that. That's not my purpose. But it's time for me to unbox. I'm going to start with the monitor, and I'm going to go ahead and then do the Mac Studio. I need to get this set up so that I can do the transfer of all the data and programs from my current Mac to the new Mac. And I've talked with Apple support a couple of times to try to make sure I understand the best way to do that, and it seems pretty straightforward, but you know, nothing ever completely goes right when you're doing this, you know, passwords and things like that. I have discovered I have some obsolete items on my current Mac. That's going to cause some problems, I'm sure, but my first step is just to get this thing set up and started. So let's jump in and get my new Mac put together to replace my old Mac. The only thing really notable about the unboxing was kind of the packaging itself. Apple does really, really high quality packaging, but man, it is difficult to deal with. It's hard to actually get the thing out of the box, and it's very heavy. I mean, it protects your product, that's for sure, but wow, a lot of material goes into the packaging, and it can be a little tough to get things out of their box. Well, we come at last to the magic moment. After unboxing and setting up the minimum configuration, my new Mac is booting for the very first time. And we'll see if we've got things hooked up correctly here. All I have hooked up is the Studio display. This is currently not hooked up. The keyboard does have a wire that came with it, but it's also Bluetooth, and I should be able to get it working without having to connect the wire, so we'll see. First minor glitch in the setup. I did not have the Thunderbolt cable from the monitor to the Mac Studio in the correct Thunderbolt connector in the back of the Mac Studio. So I had to play with that a little bit to figure that out. Okay, and we're proceeding a couple more steps further along here. I've got my my mouse going. I have my Mac plugged into the right slot in the back of the Studio display, and we're ready to begin the process of setting up this Mac and connecting it to my existing Mac to get data and programs, security transferred over. Well, we're off and running with Migration Assistant, transferring information from my current Studio iMac to this new Mac, and wasn't 100% smooth. I think they could make it a little easier. The process definitely assumes that your two computers are right next to each other, and I just flat out don't have room in my studio for the two computers. So I'm in the next room, but I'm on the same Wi-Fi network, and it's going to transfer everything over the Wi-Fi network, and that's probably just going to take a while. My first strategy to transfer data from my old Mac to my new Mac was one I've used before, the Migration Assistant. I have never restored a complete computer from a time machine backup, which is the way that you back up on Apples. There's many, many other methods that you use on PCs. And so I have a bit of a distrust for that. So I prefer to do a computer-to-computer transfer, and it's never really been an issue before. So that's the strategy that I intended to follow with this migration of data from one PC to the other. The discerning among you will notice that I'm dressed differently. I probably look disheveled. Disheveled? Not sure what the pronunciation of that word is. It is a couple of days after my last entry in my update log here. And it's hard for me to summarize what's gone on with this process, but I will just simply say that very little of the process has gone the way it's documented to go by Apple in migrating my data from my old server to my new server. I'm not through the process yet. I'm on the second or third try of a different strategy for migrating data. And I'm not convinced that I don't have a really potentially serious problem with this unit. But I'm hopeful. So where I started out was simply following the process on my own, not working with Apple support. And as I probably have mentioned previously in this particular chapter of migrating your studio, I had called Apple support several times to get the strategy down, to say, here's what I'm doing, you know, what are the steps I need to follow, what's the best practice. And I was very confident going into that. I have used the migration assistant before. It's been a few years since I did that, but when I did it last, it did work. There are always some cleanup items after it's done, but you know, I just didn't have that many problems with it. The biggest problem I've had in this case is that the computer-to-computer transfer over Wi-Fi, and I'm really not hardwired here in my home and in my studio, so I was doing it over Wi-Fi. Really did not work. It failed a couple times in different ways, and you know, with no real ability to troubleshoot or know what was going on there. There's no way anybody's going to tell me my Wi-Fi isn't fast. It's faster than heck. But the computer-to-computer, peer-to-peer transfer protocols just didn't seem to work right. You know, I got some really bad advice from an Apple advisor that included aborting the transfer, and then subsequent Apple advisors I worked with said, no, you should never do that. It can mess up not only the PC you're transferring it to, but the one you're transferring it from, and even your cloud stuff and your Apple ID account. And in fact, I had to change my password on my Apple ID. So this got really deep, and it's obvious that Apple personnel are not used to working with the Mac Studio and or the newest versions of the OS that control things like Migration Assistant. It's obvious Migration Assistant is not documented well. For example, everything about the process that you read says be sure both computers are fully updated to the latest Mac OS. But it gives you, there's no stopping point where you can do that on the new Mac. It goes straight into the Migration Assistant. And you really have to go around a lot of setup to get to the point where you could do a Mac update. And even when I did that and got there, it would not do the update. So at this point, I'm doing a time machine restore. So I've made a time machine backup, of course, as always, on my old system, and now I'm trying to restore that. Well, I've never done a time machine restore before. And so my confidence is eroded at this moment. And, you know, these are the things that you deal with when you replace the heart of your studio. And I don't care if you're on a PC or on a Mac or whatever you're on. Full migration to a new system, especially, pardon me, bridging generations of hardware. The M1 Ultra is a completely different chip than the Intel. I have a feeling this isn't over yet, but I'm on day 2 of the migration. I spent hours on this, virtually all day yesterday. Looks like I'll spend all day on it today, even though large chunks of that may be waiting. One thing that's been super annoying is the Apple, its estimates of time are totally wonky. We had to restore the operating system completely to the Mac Studio. It had just become corrupted. And so we restored the operating system. It said it was going to take 3 hours to download it. A half hour after I started, it still said it was going to take 3 hours. And then about 15 minutes later, I looked and it said, oh, 1 minute remaining. Really? Come on, Apple. Come on, Apple. Seriously. So, definitely a little bit on pins and needles here, but hopeful. And, you know, I've been with Apple for a very long time, and I've had things happen, but nothing has ever been beyond redemption. So hopefully we can get redeemed here. And I don't have a time estimate on this right now, but I'm doing a time machine restore from a hard disk on this system, and it looks like it could take the same 24 hours that the wireless transfer was supposed to take in the first place. So it could be tomorrow. And the you know, guys I was working with said, yeah, no, it just takes an incredibly long time, even though it's coming from a hard disk. So that's where we're at right now. I hope this doesn't become one of those videos where, you know, you know, my next entry is I've got a long beard and you know, my clothes are ratty and stuff like that. I hope it's not one of those deals, but we'll see. At this point in the process, I've skipped over a lot of drama. The issues with trying to do the peer-to-peer transfer kind of went on, and Apple was trying to, you know, first of all, they provided excellent support. They did their best. I did get some bad advice as noted, but you know, spent hours with Apple. They were, you know, thinking the Wi-Fi was a problem. The Wi-Fi was never a problem. They couldn't really resolve what the problem was, but we ended up on Time Machine Restore as the right strategy for moving the data. And I had prepared a complete Time Machine backup, and of course, the original system had not, fortunately, been damaged by some of the advice I got to abort the transfer. Time Machine ended up being the strategy for getting the data off of one Mac to another. Now, in the PC world, which many of you are in, I think backup strategies are a little more difficult because the one nice thing about Time Machine is it is an Apple product and they do support it. In the PC world, you're using lots of different backup solutions, and I hope they all work great. But odds are that they're not supported directly by Microsoft or anyone else. So that is one thing that happened, is that I ended up going to the Time Machine Restore. Well, my new Mac has just completed loading after about 4 hours from the Time Machine backup, and I'm about to find out if I'm in business or still in hell. Hopefully, the next time you see me, I'm bathed and properly clothed for this job. We're about to find out. Once again, for those of you taking notice, I'm all showered up. I got clean clothes on. I'm out of upgrade hell. I was successful in getting my new Mac loaded up, and the data brought over from my old Mac. And I got to tell you, this thing is fast. I've never used a faster Mac in my life, and that is appropriate given the price tag on this thing, but I'm really looking forward to using it in production. At the end of this video, I will put a section in for the types of things that you should be prepared for when you're replacing the heart of your studio, when you're replacing your computer system, specifically about upgrading your computer. And most of that will be Apple-centric, but some of it is just generic, no matter what type of computer you have, no matter what type of upgrade that you're doing. But for Apple users, I definitely have a lot to say about the upgrade process and things that you will want to know as you head that direction. Now, there are some things that I can't properly test. In fact, one of my apps is stuck right now because it can't proceed because I don't have the dongle plugged into this computer. So I've got to now do the physical replacement of my old server with my new server so that I can plug everything in and really test the applications, make sure they're all working with the hardware. I've had to do several upgrades. I've been dorking around with relocating passwords all day because even though you're doing a file for file copy, in the Mac world at least, you're not going to get your passwords and security information that way. You've got to go in and recreate it. One thing I have noticed on the new Apple, and again I'll get into this later, is I've had to put my password in 500 times, I swear. But so far so good. It took me a solid 36 hours to actually do the migration, and a lot of that was actually spent doing the migration. So I'm ready to move on, and we're going to move back into the main studio. We're going to remove with honor my old Mac and take the opportunity to get things cleaned up in there too. There's some things you just can't do until you got everything removed, and it's an opportunity to do some dusting, some cleaning, say, yeah, I found some of my old stuff I thought I lost again, and we'll take it from there. After everything that happened, the physical setup of the new server in the studio, which comprised of taking my old Mac out, putting the new Mac in, connecting all the wires, hoping that there was a spot for all the wires, figuring out where I needed adapters, was a bit of a relief and went pretty smoothly. I did take the opportunity, as I noted, to do a little cleanup. When you remove your equipment, you find a lot of junk under and the dust and that kind of thing. So took that opportunity and it went fairly smoothly. I had only one piece of equipment that really had a problem, as I'll document in a little bit. Other than that, it was not too bad once I got to that part, which took several days. Well, it's been a long road. It's been a full week since I started my upgrade with my new computer. And it's taken me that long to get everything working again. I haven't done every single thing I ever do in my studio with every piece of gear, but I've done the primary things. I ran into a lot more than I thought I would, but that's the nature of the beast when you're replacing the heart of your studio. Now, a reminder, at the end of this video, I am going to have a section that's specifically for Apple computer users who are upgrading. I want to talk about the upgrade process to the Mac Studio particularly, and what went right, what went wrong, what you need to watch for, that kind of thing. But I'll also have a section where I just talk generically about here's some things you watch for no matter what kind of computer that you have. Calm has returned to my studio, and I didn't get a chance to do every single thing I wanted to do. I got a little bit more of a mess here with the cabling yet because I haven't had my contractor come in to do the rewiring yet, but that will happen. And the one thing that's different about the Mac Studio, you can probably see a little bit here, is that the screen sits up high. There's a lot more space between it, so I can see all those wires. Right? I didn't used to see them, so now I see them, and I'm like, okay, I got to get that taken care of. But I've got everything working together again. I've got my Mac laptop and my Mac Studio happy together. I'll tell you one thing that definitely happened throughout this process was I've never had to enter my password so many times. I must have had to enter it 500 times to get everything syncing back up and working happily together. One of the things I ran into last minute that I didn't expect was one of the pieces of equipment that's also at the heart of my studio, which is my Motu A28X audio interface, which handles everything. And it did not work when I first plugged everything in and got everything working. And I had to do something very unusual to get it to work. I had to literally reduce the security level on my computer. I don't like that, Motu. Probably going to replace it. I don't want to do that because that's a big deal, but It's obviously an old enough generation that not only did that happen, but I had to have adapters to get the Thunderbolt working and all that kind of thing. So, you know, one thing for sure is moving between the generations of Macs, I had to have a lot of adapters. And but everything has come together. I ended up with enough adapters and enough connections, and everything seems to be working together happily. So, interesting process. We'll be talking more about it here before the end of this video. But I would say it took a lot longer and was a lot more difficult even than I anticipated. But I'm glad for the preparation work that I did. And I'm so far very happy with the result. And just to talk about the results, and I'm just barely done, so I've only been able to look at a few things on the computer itself. But I'll tell you what, by far the fastest computer I've ever owned, by far faster than my old Mac, which I did not consider to be all that slow. Amazing performance so far. One thing, and again, I'll talk more about this in the Apple section, but I not only moved from generations of Mac computers, but to the new chip, the M1 chip. And I think I've dodged some bullets by waiting as long as I have to go to the M1, because I think people had a lot more trouble earlier. The one thing I'm struggling with right now is I'm not positive how to make sure that every one of my applications is actually running the M1 version. So that will probably be a little bit of an ongoing process. I'm dealing with that with the Adobe apps right now. So some miscellaneous things that are still standing out, but so far so good. And hopefully I will continue to have this the level of success with my replacement of the heart of my studio. One thing I really want to reiterate is I'm really happy with having replaced the heart of my studio. I loved my old iMac. I used it for over 7 years. It was a great piece of equipment and still is, and will remain a backup system in my studio. But it has been failing, and I was getting really nervous about that. I'm also really happy with the new Mac Studio. It's incredibly fast, incredibly powerful. I've used my video production software on it, my music production software on it, and amazing performance. There are some residual things that I'll talk more about in part 3, but for the most part, everything is workable. I really only have one significant problem that's a little bit Apple specific that, again, I'll talk about in part 3. What I experienced is something you should expect to experience if you have a similar suite of software and you do some of the same things that I do in my home studio: audio production, music production, video production, etc. You'll go through some of these things. And even in the Windows world, I think, especially with some of what I've heard about going from Windows 10 to Windows 11, you're going to have some of the security issues. Those things tend to not copy over in a backup. And again, we'll talk more specifically about that in part 3. Thanks for joining us here on Happy Place Home Studio. We'll see you next time.